So China says this controversial phone call was a, quote, petty move by Taiwan. Gordon Chang is the author of The Coming Collapse of China. He also wrote a piece for the National Interest called Why Donald Trump's Taiwan Call Changes Everything. He joins me now with a closer look. Gordon, you follow this extensively. Do you think this phone call with Taiwan was coordinated?
It certainly was. We know that Stephen Yates was facilitating the call. He is a senior Trump advisor, and he's had a long history with Asia policy going back to the Bush administration and before. Tsai Ing-wen, the Taiwan president, would not have called Donald Trump unless she knew that he would take his call. And so clearly this has been worked out beforehand. This is part of a really, I think, a new Taiwan policy on the part of Donald Trump.
So when you talk about Tsai Ing-wen, she's a new leader who's taken over Taiwan. Tell me a little bit more about her and how does she need Trump and how could that help her in this situation?
Well, she won in a landslide in the middle of January. She's from the Democratic Progressive Party. It is independence-minded. They want to see their own future as a Republic of Taiwan. She doesn't want to cause trouble with Beijing right now, but nonetheless, she is not going to do what Beijing wants, and Chinese leaders have been very upset with her. Well, it's sort of the same thing with Donald Trump. I mean, he's trying to chart a new policy for the United States that is not dependent on the old norms, which is the reason why he didn't talk to the State Department, the White House, or the American Institute in Taiwan, our de facto consulate, before he took this call.
Do you think that the U.S. should re-look at relations with Taiwan?
Well, absolutely, because our policy right now is not sustainable. What we are doing is undermining a friend, a free society, to help an authoritarian state that attacks our values. Also, we're undercutting our own geopolitical interests because Taiwan is strategically important. It blocks the Chinese Navy and Air Force from reaching the Western Pacific. And clearly much more belligerent, much more provocative, helping North Korea transferring nuclear weapons technology. It's been dismembering its neighbors, and also it's been closing up its markets to the United States. All of this in the last few years. So the current policies aren't working. I'm not saying that what Trump is going to do would make sense. I'm not saying it's going to work, but the old policies were guaranteed to fail.
How's China taking all of this?
They're upset. I mean, what they're trying to do right now is feel their way through it because they were wary about Trump anyway because of what he said during the campaign and because he was known to be independent and not tethered. He is not dependent on foreign policy elites of this country or anywhere else. And clearly the Chinese at this point want to give him some maneuvering room. I mean, they said that this call was sort of the shenanigans of Taiwan. Well, no, it wasn't. It was the shenanigans of this guy over here. And so clearly they're just trying to give him room to back off. But he's not going to want to back off because he knows what the stakes are.
How do you think this will ultimately affect U.S.-China policy if there is a completely new take on Taiwan?
Well, this is going to be extremely troubled. It's clear that Trump is going to have a hard time.
What could China do if they're unhappy about a new relationship with Taiwan?
Well, they could, for instance, start to fortify Scarborough Shoal, which they seized from the Philippines in 2012. They could further restrict the opportunities for American companies, which is what they're doing anyway, but they could accelerate that. They could try to undermine our relationships with South Korea more than they have up to now. There's a whole array of things that they can do. But you got to remember, they're a trade surplus country against us. Last year, a $334.1 billion trade surplus for China. In a trade war, trade deficit countries like the United States have nothing to lose. So he holds all the cards. Our economy is going to be vibrant. Theirs right now is extremely fragile. So they can huff and they can puff. They can try to back him down by showing that they have more political will. But if he has much political will as he does, he's going to win because he's got many more cards than the Chinese do right now.
We know that there was a 90-minute conversation between President Obama and Donald Trump when he came to the White House. And there was also an interview with the New York Times where he said that President Obama told him about one slightly thorny issue. And a lot of people speculated that that could be North Korea, that could be an imminent issue that he might have to deal with within his first 100 days. If they're taking a different stance on Taiwan, the Trump administration, how could that affect any sort of dealings with North Korea?
That's a great question because the Wall Street Journal reported that Obama did tell the Trump transition team that North Korea was the top security threat to the United States. You know, China and North Korea are thick as thieves. They have problems in their relationship, but in recent days, we have seen China support the North Korean state with more trade. They've been proliferating nuclear weapons technology in the last few months. There's all sorts of things that the Chinese are doing. They could even be more troublesome. But at the same time, though, China realizes that it needs the United States more than it needs North Korea. And so with a little bit of creative policy, remember, Trump just created a bargaining chip with his call with Tsai Ing-wen. That now he has done something that the Chinese want him to undo. Trump may say, well, look, you got to pay me to do that. So this could be a very interesting negotiation. Now, I don't think that's what he did, but that is a possible interpretation, which means that the Chinese right now are going to have to deal. They're going to try and deal, and they're going to have to see whether he wants to deal. But you got to remember, a lot of Trump's advisors really believe in Taiwan, like Stephen Yates. And so they probably are not going to let him do a deal. And that would make Beijing very concerned.
All right. It's going to be a fascinating time for you and for the Asia region. A lot to talk about in the next coming months. Gordon Chang, thank you very much.